Alright, today we're platinuming the third and final original trilogy Uncharted, and if you've watched my first two videos, then the cleanup for this is going to be very similar, and as usual we're going to have to play on crushing difficulty. We start the game in a negotiation for Drake to sell his ring to this man Talbot, and all seems to be going well until Sullivan notices that the money's fake, but as we go to leave, Talbot basically tells us that he's going to take the ring regardless. Nate of course takes this as well as you would expect. And we're introduced to the new Uncharted 3 combat system, which was pretty smooth, I'm not gonna lie. And I very quickly end up getting my first trophy for defeating 20 enemies with hand-to-hand combat. And just when I thought fighting was gonna be easy, we end up running into this absolute behemoth. I use the resources around me to take care of him. And after that, I make my way over to the corner of the bar and get a trophy for finding my first treasure. Unfortunately, as Nate and Sullivan go to leave the building, they end up finding themselves surrounded on both sides. And we're introduced to the other villain of this game, Catherine, and honestly, she just kind of looks like Catherine, so makes sense. She ends up snatching the ring off Nate, telling him that she just wants what's hers, and then both Nate and Sully end up getting shot. We then enter a flashback of Nathan from 20 years earlier, and I can't tell if he's a kid or a teenager, to be honest with you. And we learn how he came in contact with Sir Francis Drake's ring. And as he's thinking of a way that he can steal the ring, he ends up finding a young Sullivan also trying to lockpick the case to get to the ring. After secretly following him for a few blocks, he ends up seeing that he had a key made in order to get into the case. And then while he's not paying attention, Nate ends up stealing the key from Sullivan. And to Nate's surprise, he ends up getting caught and he's forced to give Sully his wallet back. But of course, Nate ends up keeping the key. And he ends up going back to that same museum in order to take both the ring and a decoder. He ends up getting caught, but somehow manages to get away while still having the ring. But after being cornered with nowhere to go, he ends up getting saved by none other than, you guessed it, Sullivan. Sully ends up explaining to Nathan that he was only working with Catherine because she was paying him a good amount of money to steal the ring, and basically Sullivan convinces Nathan to join him so he can be his protege. We then cut back to the present day where we learn that the boys didn't really get shot and they had an inside man the whole time, and his name's Cutter. And we not only learn that Nate still has the ring in his possession, but also he's still working with his old side piece, Chloe. After following where Catherine and her goons went, it ends up taking us back to this secret tunnel. And shortly after arriving, I end up finding the relic for this trophy, and after 3 games, I still don't really understand what the relic is for. And in this first combat section, I guess I forgot how to shoot because I just could not aim for some reason. After wandering further into their secret base, we learn that they now know that the ring we gave them is very much not real. And as they go on the hunt to go find us, I end up grabbing this treasure to find our 20th of the video. And after putting the real ring into the decoder, we're given a clue that ends up giving us a map that shows us that Sir Francis Drake was trying to find the lost city of Ubar. And naturally, since it's an Uncharted game, we get ambushed where I end up getting 5 headshots in a row, as well as 20 headshots total. And after clearing out a bunch of enemies, we end up hopping in the back of the van, which is always a good idea. And after arriving back at home base, Nate ends up learning more about the city of Ubar, and he learns that there's 2 different clues he needs to find, one in France and one in Syria. So they end up splitting into 2s to get it done more efficiently. As Nate and Sully end up in France, not surprisingly, there's a lot of enemies there to deal with. And it's at this point in the run I already learned that in Uncharted 3 they are not very nice because they like to spawn the enemies all around you instead of one spot now. But at this point, 3 games in, I feel like I'm a crushing pro, so I'm not allowed to complain about it anymore. And also in Uncharted 3, there was a lot of puzzles in this first bit of the game. There was this first little symbol puzzle that honestly reminded me of this game show from Nickelodeon back in the day. If you know, you know. And there was also this other one where we had to put the symbol in the correct spot. But after completing those puzzles, we end up finding half of an amulet, aka the clue that Sir Francis Drake was looking for. But because things were going too easy, we end up getting caught by Talbot and his men and are forced to hand the amulet over. But just when they were about to kill us, thousands of spiders end up entering the room and surrounding everyone. And one thing you should know about me is I really don't like spiders, so this section was absolute torture for me. However, after dealing with those little 8-legged demons, we end up having to run away from the burning building before it collapses. And after barely escaping the building before it falls down, they realize that if they ended up getting caught, then they're definitely going for Chloe and Cutter as well. So the team quickly meets up in Syria so that they can fight together. Cutter then ends up informing Nate that Catherine's a part of some sort of secret society that Sir Francis Drake was also a part of, and that's why they're trying to claim all these things. But before getting into all that, I ended up popping a few trophies, the first one for getting 30 kills with the arm micro, the next for getting 50 hand-to-hand combat kills, and the last for collecting 40 different treasures. As we progress further, Cutter ends up getting hit with some sort of dart. This causes Talbot to basically have him under mind control, and he tells him to give him all the clues as well as not to trust Nate. But as this is going on, Nate and Sullivan end up finding a secret tunnel. And while we were in this cave, Cutter ends up trying to act out on what he was informed to do, but luckily he ends up snapping out of it. And after once again solving another puzzle, we end up finding the second half of the amulet. And lucky for us, Nate ended up drawing the first half, so now we have the complete puzzle. As we go to leave, we end up in a stalemate with Talbot, and Cutter ends up pulling out the Uno reverse card and helping us buy some time. And it was at this point of the story that I learned that the riot shield wasn't nearly as good as it was in Uncharted 2, because whenever it broke in this game, it gave you a really slow and stupid animation that just ended up getting me killed and soft locking me in the spot for a few minutes. But we end up escaping with Cutter only suffering a broken leg. After researching the clue for a while, we learned that we needed to go to Syria, and we end up finding one of Nate's old friends. And we also learned that at some point between Uncharted 2 and 3, Nate and Elena ended up getting married, but then separated, and I don't know, it's all kind of a mess. And as we go to search for these secrets, we end up running into some of Talbot's men, where we use some questionable methods to fight. I then had to solve a location puzzle, a gear puzzle, and this shadow puzzle that I'm not even going to lie to you guys, I just looked up. I think I've earned that at this point. And after solving it, we once again have to run away from spiders.
Oh my God!
And as we go to leave, we get hit by the same dart that got Cutter earlier. And then Nate starts tripping balls as he tries to run away. When we wake up, we're greeted by Catherine, who now has our ring, and we're also greeted by Talbot, who ends up getting the upper hand over us. When we wake up next, we learn that we've been captured by a pirate, and that he wants to know where Ubar is. Oh, and he also claims that he has Sullivan. And obviously Nate doesn't play when it comes to Sullivan, so he ends up breaking free and fighting back. Then shortly after, I get a trophy for finding the 60th treasure. And then I begin my wild chase to go and try and find Sullivan. And because there were so many enemies, I ended up getting a few combat trophies, the first one for getting 30 kills with the cow, and this next one for getting blind fire kills. And when I say there was a lot of enemies, they really just started showing up out of nowhere. At one point I even pulled out a grenade launcher to just try and make things easier and get through it. There was even this cool fight scene where I was hanging on the side of the ship fighting them, and I ended up getting a trophy for killing 20 of them. And after clearing hundreds of enemies out, we end up making our way to the ship where we think they have Sullivan. But as we get there, a giant ass wave ends up hitting the side of the ship. But don't worry, it didn't deter the enemies from making my life miserable, because they still proceeded to corner me from every direction and gun me down. As we finally made our way onto the ship, we end up getting this random trophy pop for jumping inside of a pool. And in this next boat section, I really ended up using my head glitching skills to my advantage. And after finally finding our way to Sullivan, we find out that...
Wait a minute! Who are you?
And this chapter was fittingly called Sink or Swim, and I did a lot of sinking, so fuck this chapter. But I did end up getting this trophy for getting 100 headshots, so that's cool, I guess. And during the middle of the fight, the whole boat ended up turning on its side, so we had to fight from the boat on its side at this point. And the pirate ends up trying to sink the entire ship, including himself and me, but luckily Nate's got the burner, so we made it out just in the nick of time. Nate ends up washing ashore in Yemen because he's the luckiest motherfucker alive, and he ends up learning from Elena that Sully got captured and is being forced to lead Catherine to Ubar. And as we go to steal a ride from a plane, I end up finding my 80th treasure. And what was supposed to be a quiet operation ended up turning into a shootout. Oops. As Nate runs to go get onto the plane, the gate ends up closing and we're forced to take a different path to end up chasing the plane. But just in the nick of time, Elena ends up picking us up in her Jeep and drives us close to the plane wheel. And yeah, Nate ends up getting on. He's the craziest dude ever. And unfortunately for Nate, he ends up getting caught relatively quickly after getting onto the plane, and he drops a bunch of the cargo on it to try and get out. And for any other single human being on the whole wide planet Earth, this would be certain death. But of course, we're talking about the luckiest man on the planet, Nate, so of course he's going to find a way to get out of this alive. But this time surviving came at a cost because Nate ended up having to wander the desert for 2 days and even started seeing mirages, and let's just say he barely made his way out this time. And of course, as Nate ends up stumbling into the city, there's a bunch of people, but it helps me get this trophy for getting 30 kills with grenades. And as it appears Nate's starting to be overwhelmed, he ends up getting rescued by this man named Sheik, and they ride out. We learn that the city of Ubar that we're looking for has been doomed by King Solomon because he imprisoned Jinn in a vessel, and it basically tells the story of how people with flaming heads are going to create an army, and that's why Catherine's after it, so we have to put a stop to it. But the first order of business is saving Sully, and we start doing that by attacking this convoy. And during this process, I ended up getting 30 kills with the M9 for this trophy. We end up finding Sullivan and rescuing him, leading him to safety, and saving ourselves before the convoy crashes. And from here, Nate and Sully end up fighting their way into the city of Ubar. But the city was anything but peaceful and relaxing because I had to go against these enemies who were on fire and also could just teleport, so that was super fair and balanced and didn't make me mad at all. I ended up progressing a little further and grabbing our last treasure of the game. Well, second to last treasure, because I grabbed it again and got another trophy, so I don't know what's going on here. And in this next section of the game, I ended up unlocking a few of the different combat trophies. I got 30 kills with the sniper, with the SAS shotgun, and with the Mal AR. Nate and Sully end up meeting back up and find Catherine using a winch to recover the vessel, and Nate ends up destroying not only the witch but also a support column and causes basically the whole city to collapse. And while escaping, I got 30 kills with the sniper for this trophy. Catherine ends up falling into a sinkhole and having one of the funniest death scenes I think I've ever seen. Unfortunately, Nate's ring ends up going with her. And now that Talbot's leader's dead, he's pretty pissed off and wants to fight us, so we enter this very different boss fight where it's basically just hand-to-hand combat the entire time. Very different, and I don't think I was a fan of it. But ultimately, we end up shooting him and he falls to his death. Yeah, that's pretty much it. Following Talbot's death, we're granted the 4 difficulty trophies for beating the game on easy, normal, hard, and crushing. And we're shown the scene where Nate and Elena end up making up with each other. And then for the 3rd time, Nate, Sully, and Elena end up leaving and living happily ever after. I'm sure nothing will happen in the 4th game, right? And now for the cleanup, which we won't spend much time on because it's basically the same as the other 2 games. I got 30 kills with the Dragon Sniper, 30 kills with the Mag 5, 75 kills in a row without dying, 30 kills with the RPG, getting a bunch of hipfire kills, absolutely smushing this guy with the big body character I chose, 30 kills with a Pack 80, entering photo mode, getting 4 kills with 1 explosive, getting 20 grenade kills while hanging, getting 50 silent takedowns, defeating 30 enemies in a row with your pistol, a new but really random trophy where you had to kill 50 enemies in a row without the gun auto reloading. For this trophy I had to not get hit during combat with one of the big guys. For this trophy I had to get 20 kills while being in water, and I got the trophy Land Shark, which reminds me of... I got this trophy for throwing back a grenade and getting 2 kills. This one for getting 10 total kills with throwing back grenades. I had to execute a few more fish slaps to get this trophy. And then I had to alternate getting kills with my gun and then kills with my fists to get this trophy. And now for the speedrun trophies, where I once again had to run away from spiders. I hate them for this. Take out an entire army of men. And we also had to outrun this burning building falling apart in order to get this trophy for beating the level in under 9.5 minutes. I then had to go back to the plane sequence and make sure to run all the way and get to the plane in under 12 minutes. And lastly, I had to get to the convoy, rescue Sully. Then I had to fight a small army and open up the secret gates. And I did all this in under 15 minutes to get the last speedrun trophy, and following right after that was the platinum trophy. My thoughts on this game, I think it was a step down from Uncharted 2 for sure, but I would put it above Uncharted 1, so I'd put it right in the middle of the trilogy. Overall a pretty good game, but I think the story could have been a little bit better. But with that being said, the first Uncharted trilogy is officially done, and if you guys liked it, please make sure you leave a like, comment, and subscribe. And I can't wait to see you guys for Uncharted 4 soon. Peace.